Hi everyone, Bindu here from Crafty Meraki. Before we start with today's projects, I want to share with you the Crafty Meraki website, and I want to show you how easy it is to find things on our website. So on our website, you click on collections, and that brings you to this page where you can see that all the brands that we carry are listed here in alphabetical order. Not only are the brands listed, but as you can see, dyes, distress inks, basically categories, ink cubes, inks, they're listed by brands as well as by categories. So say you're looking for distress inks, you can just go directly to distress inks and buy the distress inks that you're looking for. Oh, and what's this here today? We have a special collection created that has all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. So it's clearly called SSBE Demo Products. So you can just go to collections, find SSBE Demo Products, and you can just shop for all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. I will also give you the link to the collection, so it's easier to find that way as well. Be sure to check out the blog section of the website as well, because the design team shares daily inspiration in this section. In addition to the pictures of their projects, the design team also shares the process that they use to create that card. Today's project involves watercoloring with distress ink reinkers. And I'm going to be using this watercolor kit from Crafty Meraki. It's called the Crafty Meraki Special Edition Watercolor Kit. I'm sharing with you the contents of this box and this kit right now. First up is this No Line Coloring Detail Ink by Ink on 3. It's called Fade Out ink. And it has 3 colors of distress ink reinkers: mustard seed, picked raspberry, and salty ocean. 3 colors of distress ink reinkers, and these are the reinkers that we're going to be using to watercolor our project today. This watercolor kit also comes with an all-to-new watercolor brush that I'm going to be using for making the card today and watercoloring the card today. The kit has these sentiment strips, pre-printed sentiment strips that come in the box. The kit also comes with 4 panels of watercolor cardstock by 𝐂𝐭, pre-cut watercolor cardstock from 𝐂𝐭, as I'm showing here. It has a textured side and a smooth side like with any cold press watercolor paper. The kit also comes with these sequins, butterfly sequins by Studio 𝐂𝐭. Gorgeous butterfly sequins. Also in the kit is this Hefty Doodle stencil called Wonderfully Woven. And last but not least is the stamp set in the kit by Waffle Flower. This is called the Bouquet Builder number 7 stamp set from Waffle Flower. And I'm going to be using this stamp set today to watercolor our project. Here's another look at all the contents of the watercolor kit. All of these supplies are included in the kit, and we're going to be using this kit to make our project today. So to begin with, I'm going to be using the Fade Out No Line Coloring ink on my watercolor cardstock panel. And I'm going to use 2 of the leaf images from this stamp set, and I'm going to randomly stamp them throughout the panel in order to make my own background, if you will. I'm using the 2 leaf images from this stamp set, and I'm rotating them and stamping them alternately, one or the other, depending on what area I'm trying to fill. That's all I'm doing, and I just stamped the whole entire panel with those 2 leaf images. It's hard to see on camera right now, but as I'm painting those images, you'll see what I mean. So I'm taking my pre-stamped watercolor panel. I have my watercolor brushes. One of them has water in it, and I have another brush without any water in it. And I'm gonna primarily use the water brush without water in it, and that's why I have my water mug or cup, if you will, on the side, and I have my 3 Distress Ink Reinkers that come in the kit. I have my watercolor palette and my pre-stamped panel, which we're going to be coloring. So for today's technique, this is watercoloring, but this is what is called a negative watercoloring technique. And I'll show you what I mean as we're going through the demo today. First, I'm going to take literally 1 drop of the 3 colors of Distress Ink Reinkers onto my palette. You'll see that Distress Ink Reinkers, 1 drop literally goes a very long way. I had a ton of the ink left over after I was done coloring. So the kit comes with picked raspberry, mustard seed, and salty ocean. So a pink, a yellow, and a blue. This is basic color theory, but for those of you that are new or you need a refresher, I will explain anyway. So essentially, I'm mixing the pink and the yellow to come up with an orange color. If you mix the blue, the salty ocean, and the mustard seed, you'll get a green shade. And then if you mix the blue, salty ocean, and then picked raspberry, the pink, you get a purple color. So I'm going to be making a rainbow with just these 3 colors, and you'll see how in just a second. So back to our negative painting technique. Negative painting, all it really means is that you paint everywhere on your panel except where you have the stamped images. So essentially, I am going in with my brush and my ink around the leaf images. I am not going to color the leaf images. I am going to color around the leaf images. You'll see more of this panel in a second, but essentially, I am not coloring the leaves. I am just coloring around the leaves. So you can start to see the leaf shape here show up a little bit, but you'll see more of that as we go along, as we make progress. So it's just a fancy way of saying paint outside the lines, if you will, in my opinion. But I love this technique because I get to color and cover the whole entire panel, and I get to do a rainbow color, rainbow pattern. So essentially, we're going to be left with the watercolor panel everywhere colored except for where the leaves are. So I'm going to start with the picked raspberry. I'm going to start directly with the pink onto the paper, and I'm going to blend it out slowly. While I am blending out with the brush, as I mentioned, I'm using the brush without any water in it. I dip into my water cup from time to time to grab some water onto my brush. But I'm going to simply blend out or spread out the ink, spread out the color onto the panel as evenly as I possibly can. So I mixed here, you can see that I mixed the pink and the yellow, the mustard yellow and picked raspberry to create a shade of orange. I did that for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to show you that you can mix these colors and create your own colors, if you will. And also, as I'm building the rainbow on the panel, I can directly dip into the orange and start using orange on my panel. So when doing the rainbow blending, you can use the colors directly and blend them on the panel directly, or you can do it this way where you have your colors pre-mixed on your palette and simply blend them on the paper once you start painting. So you're seeing me here going into the orange on this section of the panel. I'm simply taking the orange directly from my palette and I am blending it onto my watercolor cardstock. Also, to go back to our negative painting, you can see here that you can see the leaves in this right-hand corner all the way at the bottom, that the negative portion of the leaves is painted, but the actual leaves themselves are going to remain white. So I apologize in advance, but I know you can't see the images on camera. However, all we're doing is simply painting around the leaves. If it makes you comfortable, if it makes you feel better, I would stamp these images with a black ink, if you will. So just stamp the images with a black ink so you can see where you're painting, and you can color around the black everywhere else except for the leaves. You can color. If that's easier for you, I would encourage you to try that rather than stamp with the no line fade out ink. I will show you towards the end why I used no line ink versus black ink. And I'll share that tip for the very end. But for now, I am continuing on with my watercoloring, negative watercoloring, using the orange on this panel. I have to apologize here for a second, because as much as I would love to show you my entire process, I cannot ideally show you all the process, because this painting took me almost 2 hours from start to finish, just the painting part. So because of time constraints here today, I'm not able to show you the whole coloring process. However, I did exactly what I'm doing here. I simply took the color from my palette and I blended it onto the watercolor cardstock. And I was careful not to go inside the leaf image. I just stayed outside and I started blending in the rainbow order. So you see here, I started with the pink. I didn't use a red. I started with the pink. Then I blended orange. And after that, I'm going to go direct with the yellow, the mustard seed. After that, I'm going to blend the blue and green to get the blue and yellow to get the green color. And next, I'm going to go directly to blue. And then finally, I'll do the pink and blue color combination to give me that purple/violet color. So as I mentioned, this is where I'm coming in with the mustard yellow directly onto the paper. And once again, I am being very careful to color outside the lines of the stamped leaf images. I am not coloring the leaves, but I'm simply coloring around the leaves. And don't be scared of watercolor or these fancy names like negative watercoloring technique. I mean, the idea is to just pick up some color, put it on paper, and have fun along the way. You will be shocked, surprised, I think, if I tell you that when I first started painting with distress inks as watercolor medium, I had barely ever used any kind of watercolors before that. And I started watercoloring literally in July or August of last year. So less than 6 months. So if I can do it, I promise you, anybody can do it. And also, like I said, I was new to watercoloring. I was new to distress ink Reinkers, but I was encouraged because of actually not a watercolor, but a daily marker coloring challenge on social media that 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐽 runs. And the idea there was to just pick up some color, put some color down on paper every day for 30 days. Honestly, that very much helped me. And I can say that I am where I am now because of all that practice that I had during the watercolor challenge. Okay, so I am bringing in the Salty Ocean, which is the blue, onto the panel directly. So in our rainbow order, it would be green next. So what I'm doing here is I am actually directly blending the blue and the yellow on the panel, on the watercolor panel, to get a green directly on the panel, rather than mixing it on the palette and then bringing in the green. So I'm doing it this way because I want to show you that you can do it both ways. You saw me doing the orange, making the color orange on the palette and then bringing in the color directly onto the paper. And now I'm sharing with you how you can blend directly on paper using the two shades. So another tip I can share here is to work with very little bit of water. I find that the less water you have, the more control you have on your paints. So for this type of watercoloring, just use very tiny amounts of water. Like I said, the brush I'm using doesn't have any water in it. From time to time, I'm dipping into my water mug to get my brush wet. And you see I have the rag here to wipe off the excess water. There are techniques in watercoloring where you use excessive amounts of water, which is, if you're covering up a whole panel, and it's called wet on wet technique. So in other words, your paper or the panel is flooded with water, and then you introduce wet watercolors into that. It's called wet on wet. But essentially, there are techniques where you can use excessive amounts of water. But for this project and for this panel, my key is to use as little water as possible. So here I'm back to mixing the color in the palette, and I'm going to bring in a slightly darker shade of green onto the panel in preparation for our transition to blue next in the rainbow order. So as you can see, I started in this angle on the top left with the pink, then the orange, then the yellow in the middle, and then I brought in the lighter green in the middle to our slightly darker green. And next I'm going to bring in the blue and blend it with this green directly on the panel. So here I'm starting to bring in the blue, and I'm going to go directly onto the panel with the blue, and I'm going to blend it with the green and continue along on the panel in the rainbow order. Two things to remember: still we are painting around the leaf images. We're not painting inside the leaves. This is negative painting, like I said. So we're going to paint everywhere that we don't see the leaf image. We're covering the background of the panel, so to speak. And the other thing is, like I said, we're going in the rainbow order: red, orange, yellow, green, blue. And then next I'm going to bring in the purple. Another important thing to note here is that we don't want to create harsh lines. So as much as possible, as you keep introducing these new colors on your panel, go back over the colors you previously added and blend them out just a tiny little bit. Use, like I said, barely a drop of water and go over the colors that were added before and blend over. Next, I'm going to introduce pink onto blue in order to get our purple color in the rainbow order. Once again, here I'm blending the pink directly with the blue on the panel rather than mixing a purple on my palette. Like I said, whatever makes you feel comfortable, feel free to try it. If you're more comfortable mixing it in the palette rather than on the paper, go ahead and do it that way. For me, like I said, I did this for two reasons. One is to show you that you can either blend directly on the panel or you can blend on the palette. But the other reason too is that it's a little bit more organic, I think, if you mix it directly on the panel, because you get this blending naturally with all these colors that we're adding on. But like I said, whatever makes you feel comfortable, I would encourage you to try that. Once I'm done blending the purple on the panel, I am going to start going back in the reverse order because I don't obviously want a muddy mess on my panel. So if I was to mix purple and yellow, for instance, I would be left with mud, right? So I don't want to do that. And that's why what I'm doing next is I'm going back from purple to slightly blue to green, because I know I can come back to the green in this order, and then I'm going to try to mix from green into back into the pink on the other side. So I'm sorry that I have to share sort of an abbreviated version of the watercoloring today because of time constraints, but the idea still remains the same. You want to blend the colors, you want to avoid colors that are going to make a mud. You just want to have a gradual blending on your panel. So essentially the process remains the same for all of this. The great thing I want to say about the watercolor kit that I shared with you at the beginning of the demo is that it comes with everything you need for your cards. The watercolor cardstock, your watercolor brush, the inks, the stencil stamp, the sentiments, everything. And not to mention the butterfly sequins, plus the Ink on 3 fade out no line coloring ink. So next, like I said, after the blue, I brought in a very light green, and from the green, I'm going to blend into yellow, orange, and then the pink towards the end of this cardstock panel. So here I'm directly bringing on the mustard yellow onto the panel. So like I mentioned, it's important to go back and blend into the previous color, like you're seeing me do here, so that you don't have any harsh lines left anywhere. So to reiterate, only a couple of things to remember here, that you want to use very little bit of water. You want to go back over one shade with a damp brush so that you can blend and you don't have any harsh lines. All right, so I'm almost nearing the finish line here. I am going back with my blue, my yellow, making a green, and I'm gonna blend that into the yellow and the orange pink at the bottom. Okay, so I'm putting the finishing touches on. I am making sure everything looks blended and doesn't look like there's any harsh lines. So essentially just finishing up. This is what the blended panel looks like. And now you can see why it's called negative painting, because we painted everything except for the actual leaf images. So like I said, I'm finishing it up and we'll go to the next step. For my next step, I'm going to be using the Tombow Mono Twin Marker. This is a black marker which has two tips on it. One is a medium tip and the other one is an extra fine tip. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually just outline the leaf images with the black marker. So this is what I mean. Essentially, I'm just taking the marker and outlining the shape of the leaf image. At this point, the ink is still visible to me. Even though it's the fade out ink, I can still see it. And all I'm doing is I'm going over the stamped image with my black marker. So like I mentioned, I am doing it this way rather than stamping it with black ink because I feel like this gives a cleaner look, if you will. Let's say you stamp with the black ink and then you paint. There could be overlap between the black ink and the watercolor. Whereas this way, I am outlining on top of the watercolor. At this point, my panel is dry. I should also mention that. But I'm outlining the images so that it gives it a much cleaner look rather than having a black image and then going over on top of the black with the watercolor. Like I said, also, if you feel more comfortable using a black ink and stamping with a black and then doing the negative painting, by all means, try it that way too. I am sure you will be able to get great results that way as well. But this is something that I learned from my acrylic painting days. You do all your painting first and then you do your outlining last, which gives it a much cleaner, finished look. And like I said, that's why I'm doing it this way. I guess old habits die hard, right? I'm just used to my cleaner outlined look at the end of your painting concept. So here's a look at our finished card. All I did was add the heat embossed sentiment on top of this panel that we just watercolored. I want to show you another card that I made in exactly the same way, but all I did different was add this die cut sentiment. And I also want to show you a close-up of the butterfly sequins that come in the kit. And I added some of those onto this card. Here's some more cards I made with the same kit. This one is just the watercolor panel with gold embossed flowers from the same waffle flower stamp set. Here is one that I made with one of the bigger flower images with no line watercoloring. And I added some leaves from the same stamp set to finish this off. And you can see the butterfly sequins once again. Here's another example of all the variety of cards you can make with just one kit. This panel is a watercolored background panel, and I heat embossed in white the flowers that are in that stamp set that comes with the kit. Here's another one with a watercolored panel, and I just simply gold embossed the leaves, and I mounted this on sort of twisted onto the card panel. And I want to show you that these two cards use the sentiments that are included in the kit as sentiment strips that I had shared. So these sentiments that come with the kit, I simply added this one with a foam tape and this one just mounted directly on top of the card panel. For the show special today, you can take 15% off of the price of the kit by using the code watercolor15. I will see you all again soon with another project. Until then, stay happy, stay crafty. Bye!